Someone's been following you. They're everywhere. They're in the subway. They're on the dance floor. They tried to run you over with their car. It's not demons. It's the Pod Boys. I'm Matisse Van Rossum, and I'm rubbing my tentacles on everything.
I'm George Costanza, attorney at law, formerly known as Ben Sheets.
I'm Clockwork Agent Orange, Cleveland Mosier.
Ooh, nice one.
I was sitting on that the whole movie.
Hell yeah.
Can you sing us that doo-wop song?
Yeah, please.
Well, we were trying to figure out a cold open, and I was saying that maybe there's like a doo-wop song about climbing a ladder.
Yeah, and then you sang some of it. It sounded like
a ladder, up to your window, gonna say hello. That's a song, right?
Yeah.
Bip fap.
That was excellent.
It's a low-key day here at Pod People headquarters.
Thank God.
We're having a lazy Saturday afternoon. My co-hosts seem to be struggling from the festivities of the night before.
Yes.
I'm feeling great.
Well, we got one person going.
Yeah, we're talking about my pick this week, Jacob's Ladder, the 1990 film directed by Adrian Lyne.
Lynn?
L-Y-N-E, whatever. Lynn Lyne. This is a movie that I remember seeing in college and enjoying quite a bit. I feel like it's somewhat of a cult classic horror film. Not everybody is familiar with it, but it's definitely got its fair share of fans.
It's definitely like well referenced.
Oh, yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, it's influential, for sure.
Absolutely, and we'll get into that. Cleveland, this was your first time seeing Jacob's Ladder, correct?
Correctamundo.
Ben, you've seen it before, right?
Yeah, I think one of the last times I saw it was back in high school on VHS.
Oh, so. Jesus Christ. I
What's
saw
a VHS?
I watched it like sophomore year of college, I think, is the last time I saw it.
Is that like a turntable?
Cleveland, what were your basic impressions as a first viewer? As you said, this film has been referenced a lot. How did it live up to your expectations, knowing some of the references but not having seen the movie?
It's good. I like it. Yeah, it was good. I had a great time.
Catch us next week.
Bye.
It's good. I give it stars.
Yeah.
That many. No, I enjoyed it a lot. I think it suffers in the third act. It hits a lull. Yeah. Which is strange because the first and second act do such a great job of building towards something.
Towards a climax that kind of doesn't really happen.
No, it tuckers out.
Yeah, well, let's not get too far into that just yet. The basic premise of Jacob's Ladder is it follows a Vietnam veteran, Jacob Singer, who seems to be affected with some serious PTSD that is sort of rearing its head more and more the older he gets. Then it sort of develops into like a conspiracy film about trying to find out what the government did to him and his platoon when he was in Nam. He's seeing all kinds of demons and shit.
Well, yeah, he finds out he's not the only one seeing these demons.
He's starting to get phone calls from old members of his platoon and stuff.
This reminded me of a lot.
What's that?
Taxi Driver.
Yeah, kind of.
In a way.
You know, gritty New York. It's shot, on similar cameras.
PTSD.
Yeah. I mean, nothing much beyond that, but the veneer is very similar.
The biggest connection I always make is to Silent Hill.
Yeah,
aesthetically.
I think so.
Well, I know this movie was a big inspiration for them, but like in terms of aesthetics of like gross areas and situations where you can't tell what's real and what isn't.
Falling into a mindscape.
It has the same kind of tone of like what I would call sort of melancholy dread that Silent Hill does really well. I love the opening of the film. I guess the second opening. The first one is it starts in Nam and we sort of see this attack on Jacob's platoon. I think it's one of the more horrifying depictions of Vietnam that I've seen. There's a lot of them. I mean, so of course, there's the big ones, the Apocalypse Now and Platoon and whatnot. But I think that the opening is pretty strong, especially because the immediate impression that there's something else going on as well, because some of the some of the members of his platoon, Ving Rhames, like starts having a really horrible seizure. One of the other characters is screaming about his head, and like they're being attacked, spinning around. They're being attacked at the same time.
The thing I think I enjoyed most about that scene that struck me was actually the Foley. I think it does a great job of centering you, because they don't change out the Foley between shots. It's fairly consistent throughout. So even though the camera is cutting constantly, you always have the audio to kind of like hold you a little bit more centered. Mm-hmm. You're still incredibly disoriented, and sounds are coming in from all directions, but they're coming in consistently. And I thought that was very effective. Also, just the sounds themselves are very juicy, considering when it was made. Like all the machine gun fires and the bombs dropping are very rich. And the footsteps all sound like really, juicy. I really enjoyed the Foley of that scene.
I think in general, the sound design in this movie is pretty solid. It does a good job, like you said, of grounding a lot of the more surreal things in this movie in a really interesting way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, at the end of that sequence, we see Jacob, who's played by Tim Robbins, I didn't mention, who does a really great job in this movie in general. We see him get gutted with a bayonet, and then he wakes up on the subway. And I like the intro, but I really love the whole opening part with him on the subway, just like waking up alone. And it's like, it's like New York before they really like cracked down and cleaned up the city a lot. So it's just like horribly
a rough subway,
horribly grimy subway car, but it's completely empty, and he goes to another car, and there's this weird old babushka just sort of eyeballing him strangely. He sees a homeless man sleeping on the train, and he thinks he sees like a tail coming out of the homeless man's coat, and then
he has to leave the subway right before he gets a good look at it. It's paced perfectly. Yeah. I love that.
And then to have him be on this like totally empty platform, and he tries to go up to the surface, but the stairs are like gated off. So he then has to cross the subway tracks and almost gets run over by a train. I love when he dives out of the way and falls on the ground, and you see like the train passing by, and like everybody inside it looks monstrous, but it's going by so fast that you can't get a really good sense of it.
Yeah.
You can see that it's like underlit and it's like blue, so it's immediately like very surreal and ethereal and nightmarish.
Oh, yeah.
And just like the isolation of that, it's so Silent Hill. Like it's such that's such 100%. A good comparison.
I love the final figure looking back at him on the subway too.
Yeah.
It's just vague enough, like there's something like some sort of skin like over his face, but you can't tell exactly what. And it's very invoked like those like classic like Slenderman photo, imagery.
A little bit
stuff, just that like covered face. I enjoyed the shit out of it. This film, the visuals, unfortunately infrequent as I found them to be. I really was left wanting more by the end of the film. What the film does give you, it gives it to you very well.
Yeah, and I mean, I would agree that they're a bit infrequent. They
kind of drip feeds you.
Yeah. But we really go from one set piece like that to another between the subway and the dance sequence.
The party scene is really great as well.
It is probably the one that always stands out to me the most, just because it's sensory overload in a lot of ways.
The strobe light is nice. The music keeps getting louder.
Yeah, the super loud James Brown.
The quick cutting too.
Mm-hmm. And of course the props.
And of course the props. Yeah, he sees like his girlfriend orgasmically dancing with some Lovecraftian looking beast. I love that you get an impression of it, but you don't ever really see what it is. I think that scene is really great. The hospital scene later on is we'll come back to that. That's phenomenal. Yeah, atmospherically, I think, especially for the time, this film is unparalleled in a lot of ways. The lighting is almost noir for, I think, most of the movie. Even the ones where there's not anything like particularly surreal or nightmarish going on, like it's so moody. There's so much so much contrast between like really overblown windows and like dark shadows caused by like blinds and curtains and stuff like that. There's also an element of the family drama too. We were talking about that last week with Crawl.
Yeah.
And how, well, I mean, we had differing opinions on whether it worked or not. In this movie, I think that the family drama actually is quite effective.
Oh yeah, I think it's played out just right. Any more would have been too much. And
well, there's this interesting dynamic with like his old life and his current life. Like before he went off to Nam, his son, played by Macaulay Culkin in one of his earliest roles, is killed. A car hits his bike. For some reason, I confused Macaulay Culkin in this movie with the which movie is it where he gets attacked by a bunch of bees? Because I have that scene like very
Are you
clearly.
thinking of the movie My Girl?
Maybe. Is that the one where Macaulay Culkin gets attacked by a bunch of
Macaulay
bees?
Culkin is the thing.
No, there's definitely a movie where Macaulay Culkin, very young, gets attacked by a bunch of bees, and for some reason I always think that it's Jacob's Ladder, and it's definitely not.
It's The Wicker Man.
Oh yeah, of course, that's right. Not the bees. A lot of Wicker Man references in the last few weeks. But, and he still has, like, 2 other sons and his ex-wife, but he seems to be estranged from them, and he lives with his new girlfriend, who he works with at the post office. There's immediately, there's a lot of biblical symbolism in the movie. All of the primary characters all have biblical names. Jacob, his ex-wife Sarah, his children Jed, which I assume is short for Jedediah, and Eli, and even Macaulay Culkin is Gabriel, and his new girlfriend is Jezebel.
Yeah, that one was really on the nose, especially since there's that piece of dialogue between the two of them where she's like, what's up with all your friends having biblical names? And she has the most out of place biblical name of all of them.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of works, I think, considering that, she's kind of almost depicted as like
a seductress.
A seductress
Jezebel.
who's lured him away from his old life.
Yeah, Jezebel is depicted as a Jezebel.
His children are named after prophets, except for Gabe, who's named after an archangel.
I think that's great. I just wish that she hadn't drawn attention to it in a really weird meta way.
I mean, I guess
it's the Kojima method of giving names.
I actually have thoughts on that, but it's pretty spoiler heavy, so I'll come back to that shortly. I do have thoughts on why they do that.
I think this film does a great job of depicting a descent into madness. It does a very good job of keeping a strong degree of ambiguity over whether what we're seeing is real or not. Mm-hmm. It doesn't feel overplayed or overbaked to me. I enjoyed any of those Madden sequences the most. I wish there was more of it.
Right. Like there's that great scene too, like after the party scene, where he's become sick and he has like a 106-degree fever, and they like try to put him in the bathtub with ice water to cool him down, and he's just like totally losing it, and he wakes up from that and he's in bed with Sarah, and he's explaining like, oh yeah, I had a dream that I was living with this other woman, all of this stuff. Yeah. And it's very, very protracted, and it does a great job because there's already so many like dream-like sequences and dream sequences and flashbacks and stuff prior, that the first time I saw it, when he wakes up in bed, it's like and because it keeps going for such a long time, the whole scene of him like tucking in Macaulay Culkin and like talking with him and stuff, it's like you wonder if that is really the real world and if everything you've been seeing is just a dream, and then he wakes up from that back in the bathtub with Jezzy.
See, that's the one thing about this movie where when I originally saw it for the first time, I wasn't super crazy about, because I do like some of the dreamlike jumping around, and I've come to appreciate it a bit more the more times I've seen it, but it can kind of make it feel a bit disjointed at times.
Yeah. I think intentionally, though. I think it's supposed to kind of disorient you.
Yeah, I said it during the movie. I was like, I see what they're doing, but I like how they're doing it. And that goes for all of the symbolism in this movie. I mean this. I'm blanketing this across the whole film, but like this film doesn't really hide what it's trying to do. You're there for his madcap fall to insanity, but like the symbolism is so outright. It's just that it's done well, so I don't mind it.
That's the thing, though, is I think this is one of those cases where it takes on a very different context in hindsight because so many films in the last 30 years have referenced this film with the things that they're doing, and I think that for a lot of those things, this film was the first.
Well, I mean, there's plenty of like noir films, that like depict like a descent into madness.
Oh, sure. No, I'm not referring to that specifically. That's more stuff getting like back
Hitchcock's whole pantheon and.
I guess another something that I could use that example of is like a lot of the demons that we see, quote unquote demons, the hallucinations that he has are they do that high shutter speed, like speeding up like movement, head shaking thing.
Right, they're like every 90s like grunge.
Well, right, that's the thing. This film is like the first one that was doing that.
I'll still say that I think it does it better than most of the references I've seen to it.
I think in this film it's rather effective. It's a little bit corny because it's become such a trite cliche in horror. It's been done so many times in so many bad movies too that oftentimes it's really laughable.
One example I think where the torch was well passed is like Tool's music videos.
Yeah, for sure.
I like what Tool did with that.
I think
aesthetic.
So too.
But seeing what Tool did with that aesthetic before seeing this film didn't impact it for me. I was still pretty unsettled by it. Yeah, now, I feel like having seen like all of its influences before seeing the source, I might have been more terrified if I hadn't. But I was still pretty spooked, or at least unsettled.
Do you guys want to go ahead and get into spoilers? Because a lot of my thoughts...
I think it's going to be difficult to unpack much more else about this film. It's so allegorical.
It turns out at the very end that the entire film is basically his dying hallucination after being bayoneted in Nam. He has a chiropractor character who is depicted as very angelic. He continues to like he pulls him out of over and over, pulls him out of hell. And he has this sort of pretty heavy-handed monologue about the only part of you that goes to hell is the part that is unwilling to let go of life, and that when you come to terms with your death, that the demons become angels or whatever. It's pretty corny, but it turns out to be very literal. And what I like about it too is that it leaves the idea of the supernatural very open to interpretation. You could decide that it's supernatural if you want, but also it's equally just like it's a brain death hallucination. Either works fine, and that's to go back to the thing with the Jezebel character, because she's obviously, since he dies in Nam, she's an entirely fictional character that his brain has created.
And it teases that, showing that she's like a demon at times.
Right, and what I like about that is why the Jezebel thing doesn't bother me is because the fact that all of his children have religious names, it shows that he is a religious individual, and therefore his hallucination would likely take on religious connotations. Well, for most of the movie, he thinks that he is being pursued by demons trying to drag him to hell. And when he meets with his platoon mates, some of them say the same. So as he's dying, his brain is giving this religious significance to his final hallucinations. So in that sense, with the hindsight, I don't mind the whole like heavy-handed Jezebel thing, because like that's what his brain is creating.
It's his brain trying to explain it. That's fair. I think now that we've given away the big spoilie, I would like to actually go back again to that Silent Hill comparative, because they are
Yeah,
so
totally
comparable. I'm really glad you brought that up, because the entirety of the movie is him dead, and him sort of being pulled from into these different realms that are guised as reality, but it's it's all just a fictitious sort of representation of like heaven and hell, and like that's exactly what Silent Hill does. It's generally assumed that the main characters, the characters you play have died, and they've transgressed, and they're they've moved on.
What I do like in hindsight, if you've seen the film before, you know what it's about. They basically tell you what's happening immediately as he wakes up on the subway, because he looks up and he sees that first billboard says something about New York, and it pans over to the right, and there's another one that just says hell in big red letters. Just immediately after he quote unquote wakes up from the Vietnam flashback.
Yeah. All of the subway ads had anti-drug messages too.
Yeah.
That is fun. One element of the plot that was a little strange to me, the psychedelic drug aspect of it.
I enjoyed it.
I like it too. Let's unpack that a little bit, because I think it's worth it.
I think there's some good ideas in there. I think it muddles the end twist a little bit, because in a lot of ways I see like the whole death sequence, the whole events of the movie were him like essentially going down the ladder as he's dying, and then at the very end we see him
he ascends the ladder.
Ascend the stairs, and having the drug implication of that just muddles it a little bit, in my opinion.
Somewhat, but I think the same explanation for his brain giving everything the religious significance, I think that explanation works as well for the drug stuff too, because of just like the culture of the United States pre and during Vietnam. That's when a lot of people were experimenting with LSD, and because of the war, and Taxi Driver's a great example, there's the widespread mistrust of the government, and in the second half of the film there's this whole conspiracy unraveling about like the government testing a specially manufactured drug on these guys to like improve their combat abilities and regress them to like a primal violent state. And even if that is, since it is all, even his uncovering of this conspiracy is a death hallucination, I think that just as much as him being a religious person, as a young person in Vietnam at that time, with probably a certain degree of mistrust for the government, especially by the end of his tour in Nam, it would make sense that he's also filling in the government conspiracy kind of.
And I mean, it helps give the viewer a red herring away from like the very, very apparent thing anyway. Like, I would agree with both of y'all. I think it does sort of muddy the plot a little bit. It does give a whole nother thread.
What muddies it the most, I think, is the final title card. Before the
that's the biggest.
Where they're like
the
theory that the government can experimented with psychedelics on soldiers. The government denies this, and then like the credits roll. Like that, I think muddies it a lot, because it was weird because
it didn't like source anything or something. And like, don't get me wrong, like men who stare at goats was a thing, like, or whatever else.
Sure.
But like, I mean, that's undocumented. But like,
the reason that
it's a weird way to phrase it.
The reason that muddies it is because it seems to confirm that his platoon did kill each other because of the drug experiments, and it just made them sort of go mad and destroy each other. And that's part of his death hallucination. So the fact that they're sort of saying that is what happened is what muddies it. If they had left that out and it's just like, oh, it was all a hallucination, I would buy it more. It would make more sense. The fact that they sort of, after he's dead, confirm that that's what happened is
by placing that card, it confirms that's reality rather than dream.
Right.
And that's one of my biggest problems with it is,
I agree,
if it's not dream, then it's direct,
then how would he know?
And it's messy.
I agree, but I think that you can negate that entirely by just removing that title card at the end. Other than that, it just the whole government conspiracy plot, I think, just serves to disorient, but intentionally.
Yeah, the whole film is about disorientation.
Which I like. I like that because at the beginning, or in the first act, there is so much of that very heavy-handed, like, religious symbolism. Like, he's fucking flipping through that copy of the Divine Comedy, specifically Dante's Inferno, that has all of the Gustave Doré illustrations, and like it makes it very obvious that like you assume that he is dead and that he is in hell or in purgatory, and then to have sort of in the second half this like have his platoon mates come to him and be like, I'm seeing things like demons are coming for me. It's like, well, shit, what did the government do to us? None of us remember that night that we were attacked. And I think, like you said, it's a fantastic red herring.
Yeah, it's a sleight of hand. It's to sort of misdirect away from the very, very apparent religious symbolism.
Especially because they commit to it so hard that, like, it is...
It's such a huge part of the film. I mean,
right,
it'd be hard to dissect it from it. To bring up my last point on that subject, that I did like very much, even though the chiropractor character was very heavily symbolic, I very much so liked that they brought in the concept of like popping your joints and having flashbacks, because that's a very like common description with LSD and other psychedelics, is that like there are certain things that can kind of help that can cause those psychedelics to boomerang.
Right.
Like years down the road, like after you haven't had that LSD or that psychedelic for a long time,
the chemicals
you suddenly step in the shower and like pop your back a certain way, and then you suddenly have another psychedelic experience. Yeah. And on top of that, it acts as an analog for PTSD. And how soldiers will like sometimes just hear like a loud bang of like a moving truck or something, and like suddenly be right back, on the front lines again or something. And I love that they use that boomeranging concept as an allegory, and that it transfers between both. Oh, that was fucking cool. That was a neat concept, and I think that it isn't overplayed.
Mm-hmm. I think they do a really generally a very good job of depicting PTSD in a realistic, not overblown, and also sympathetic manner. I think
for the most part, I think everything is so dreamlike that it's hard to take any of that stuff literally. Mm-hmm. So some of it is portrayed realistically, but like they're not seeing demons, but that's their dreams, right.
Well, yeah,
so like.
I think that there is definitely a certain degree of losing touch with reality.
Yeah.
It maybe not so literal as seeing demons. You're absolutely right about that, and that's why they try to depict that as like government conspiracy.
Right.
They're not trying to say that that's caused by the PTSD, but his general like mistrust of people and the sort of like flip-flopping and the panicking and the panic attacks and stuff, I think is pretty well handled.
Yeah, and I will say that I'm sure that many people do not like the ending. I just at a guess that a lot of people would feel that the ending of this film is a cop-out, and that it's he was dead the whole time, great, because so none of it mattered, etc.
Because it's been referenced so much.
I don't have much of an argument against that. I enjoyed it. I didn't personally.
Once again, though, it was when this film came out, when they did that was not a common trope.
Wait, when specifically was this film?
1990.
It's prior. Prior to the Sixth
Sense. It had been done before.
Yeah,
but
it wasn't. But it wasn't as widespread of a trope.
Yeah,
like it's not. People in I don't think people in 1990 when this came out were like, oh yeah, it's that classic he was dead the whole time thing. Like we
But I'm sure people thought of it as a cop out, especially after them going so far into the conspiracy aspects and stuff
it's
in
possible.
The movie. Personally, the ending is what makes the movie work for me a lot more.
Yeah, I think so too.
Because I think without that kind of connecting everything together, the movie is kind of disjointed, just because you have so many different disparate subplots all over the place, jumping between each one. And it gives you a very intriguing, disorienting feel.
Yeah.
But, you know, as a narrative, it doesn't always hit home. But I think connecting that together connects everything.
I think you're right. And I think in a lot of ways, this film is probably more successful on multiple watches. At least it is for me, because I think the first time I saw it, like, I liked how atmospheric it was, but it was very disjointed in ways that I found kind of frustrating until the end, when you have that context that brings it all together. And then going into it this time, knowing how it ends, I feel like I was able to understand it a lot better, and the things that they were doing, and being able to recognize, like, oh, okay, yeah, that's you know, they're using this type of misdirection for this reason, and that it's supposed to be disorienting. That's the whole 100%. That's the whole idea.
It does a great job of it.
I think it's really strong on that front.
Well, I think we've unpacked the heaven and hell stuff. We've unpacked the psychedelic parts. We've unpacked the ending. Can we just unpack the third act and why it didn't really work for several of us?
I think it's time for that.
Maybe all of us Tisa and I kind of generally shared our thoughts, and we can unpack them more. But what's your perspective on the third act?
Well, it just slows down with the direct revelation of BX, the drug that was given.
The ladder, as they call it.
Yeah, I actually like the explanation of the ladder.
Same.
I think it holds a lot of metaphorical point to it, especially, you know, towards the very end with the ascending the stairs, you know.
With Macaulay Culkin, yeah. Into the bright white light.
I did think it was a bit on the nose in the moment. It definitely feels like an exposition dump, and I kind of wish there was a way they could have introduced some of that a little more naturally than have, you know, just the doctor call.
Yeah.
And explain everything.
True, yeah, Dr. Exposition.
Dr. Exposition strikes again. I think the explanation is good. I agree with you. I like that scene, especially where it takes place, with them sort of walking in these run-down, abandoned industrial buildings and stuff like that. I think aesthetically it's great. My problem with it is that scene and that explanation feels like it's part of the build-up to a climax that has been coming prior to that as well. And it's like after that, he gets in a cab and asks to be taken home, and they take him to, like, his old home where his wife and sons live, and he just, like, falls asleep on the couch and wakes up and sees Macaulay Culkin, and then they ascend the staircase into a blinding white light, and then we see him, dead in Vietnam. And it's like, it's such
where's the climax?
It's such an anticlimax.
Yeah, like he's been chased by these things. He's been pursued by demons. They're coming for him. Can we get I don't want a confrontation necessarily, like in the traditional sense, but some sort of final facing.
Well, right, there's the whole.
Just give me, like it's a horror movie. Give me.
We even get the voiceover.
Final something.
We even get that voiceover from his angel doctor that we've repeating his speech about. When you accept your death and you let go of life, then the demons become angels. Like, we have that repeated in voiceover, but it's like after he is told about, like, the ladder and the experiments, and, like, his fears and his suspicions are confirmed, it's like that's all the acceptance that he needs.
Right, like,
because it's like right after that.
I love the hospital sequence.
Yeah,
but I didn't realize during the sequence that it's like the final horror sequence.
That's literally his lowest point, but then there's 30 fucking minutes. Then there's 30 minutes of the movie left after that.
And I get it; they're trying to parallel like the Inferno, like the opening sequences of the film are the most horrifying. He's in hell and he ascends into Purgatorio, and then finally in the last 30 minutes of the film, he ascends into Paradiso. Problem: Paradiso's boring.
Right.
Like I came here for horror. Like, you set me up with horror, like at the beginning of the movie, with such good horror.
And to have
such good horror.
I mean, what I will say is, like, part of me kind of likes the idea of once he has some sort of closure into why these things are happening, then that's the end. But I think the way they do that is too direct. And therefore it feels like tacked on.
Yeah.
I have heard that they cut out about 25 minutes of the third act. So I wonder if some of that was
I would guess
there.
I would put money that 20-30 minutes is between the explanation and between him going home.
Yeah.
Because that feels so sharply contrasting. It's like I like the idea of the explanation being enough to put him at peace. I like it in practice, but it's not interesting in the film, you know? Like there's a certain, I think, poetic gravitas to it, but it's just not interesting to watch.
Right. Well, it's the same problem with like a filler episode in a TV series, right? Where the main threat, doesn't exist. At that point, like it's the threat is diminished once we understand what's going on, and so we're just sort of left sitting there. And like here's what I'll say too, just to reiterate, I love how much we don't see of the demons. I didn't want like to see a demon or anything like that at the end, but just to be chased by something one last time, to be sort of right when you think that everything is coming to a close, just this one final something. To
have kind of
like the devil just has like one last grasp on him before he
he should. I feel like anything. the like you mentioned, the hospital scene is really the low part of his descent. He is
it's the bottom of the pit.
It's the deepest circle of hell for him. And then there's
I think it's like the seventh ring, not the ninth.
But then there's exactly. And then there's like the slight rising with like the doctor calling him, and then they go to set up and get the explanation, and then it just ends with him, ascending to heaven or whatever. And it's like, the way it should be is after that explanation, that's when he should have his lowest point. Yeah. Where he faces what has been done to him. We have some kind of like ultimate horror, the most inescapable of the hallucinations. And during that, when he's at his darkest moment, that he has his moment of acceptance.
I think,
and then,
from
ascends.
what I remember, in the original script, Jesse turns inside out and turns into a horrible demon monster.
Yes, please. Where was that?
Where was that?
Oh, dope. Please. Why would you cut that?
Maybe
like NC-17?
The whole story I think it just didn't test well with audiences.
It would.
They changed a lot within the script. The script back in the day went around for about a decade as one of those really popular yet unproduced scripts.
I believe
a lot of big name directors were attached to it at one point or another. I know Sidney Lumet was on it at one point.
That would have been interesting.
But the script itself, the portrayals of the demons in the script are much more directly demons from the Bible. And so it's interesting that they're made more subtle in this movie, and I think it's for the best.
Oh, God, yeah. I think so too, but I do think that being said, like, we needed to have some kind of climax.
Definitely.
There.
Well, and I think it poses a problem going from introducing the idea of the ladder and then immediately using it.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. It's like you can go. The drug sends you down the ladder, but you can also go up it.
And then
he does.
And the movie immediately.
Well,
and it's over.
What lazy fucking demons! Like they just give up on him, like because they're hounding him, they're chasing him, and then suddenly they don't in then roll credits. Like what?
Right. Yeah. I mean, he has his lowest psychological point, and then his guardian angel pulls him out of it. And then that's just enough,
It's like, you bastards, you gave me such good horror. Right. Like just a little more, just a taste.
Right, that's the thing. It's like, I even on this watch, and it's been several years since the last time I've seen this movie, it's like in the first couple of acts, I'm like, man, this is incredible. Like, this is even better than I remembered it. And then the third act, it starts to slow down. I'm like, oh, that's right. I'm like, yep, that's right. That's why I didn't love this movie as much. It's just because, like, it does such a good job of building up that, like, really, really horrifying atmosphere. And then it just kind of, poofs out at the very end. And it's like, it's not even really bad. Like, none of the stuff at the end, like, did I find frustrating or offensive. It's just like, you've done such a good job giving me what I want earlier in this movie, and it's like, you just don't deliver at the end, Overall, I still think this is a very solid film. It's a strong movie, and I enjoy it overall a lot. It's just like the third act just does not quite live up to where they're taking it in the first two acts. It's a weird bird, I think that it's referenced for good reason. I think a lot of films pull stuff directly from this movie and things that it does very well. One thing that I noticed particularly during this watch is that this movie has almost the exact same plot as Hellraiser 6, which is...
I was about to bring up Hellraiser.
And 6 came out in mid-90s, so it's after this movie.
Which one is that one? Resurgence? Retribution?
I don't remember. But
shit.
It's
nice.
I have tried.
Sometimes you just got to go with the dub.
Yeah, I've tried.
That was the time.
3 or 4 times to work my way through the entire Hellraiser series, and 6 is the one that I can never get past. That is always the one where I'm like, nope, I'm done with this. I have no desire to continue watching these movies. It's been 6 every time, and 6 has almost the exact plot of Jacob's Ladder, except instead of Tim Robbins, it's Dean Winters.
Rough.
Yeah,
really rough.
It is really rough. It does so much of the same shit. It's like spooky, like investigating a mystery. There's a lot of the high shutter speed, head shaking, twitching demons. Into this reality and at the very end, it turns out that Dean Winters was dead all along, and he's been in hell the entire time. It's literally the exact same plot of Jacob's Ladder, but done way worse.
I was thinking about that. Let me ask you guys, because I know that you're fans of both, and I have only just recently seen both of these films.
Yeah.
Which demon depictions do you prefer? Cenobites or the Jacob's Ladder demons?
They're very different. I have a hard time comparing.
I would have to say
it is kind of apples and oranges. It's kind of
the Jacob's Ladder demons, actually.
I agree. I think
just
so
because
too.
we see less of their full form.
I think it
Maybe
feels
Goody's way spookier.
it's scarier.
Yeah.
I think the depictions of demons in hell is in Jacob's Ladder. It feels more realistic to me, and considering that the entire thing is like one big death hallucination,
if not realistic, but believable. And normally those two comparatives cross.
Yeah, it's hard to say realistically because
demons.
Like,
that's why I prefer.
Well, yeah, and I mean nobody knows what happens after death, but like. Your brain releases...
Hopefully not that.
Your brain releases a huge amount of DMT as you're dying, so
True.
like
this is the
massive...
Joe Rogan podcast.
Yeah, it is. God no, please no, never.
I did find a little bit about
Hellraiser is more metal. That's what I will say. It's
more
fun.
yeah.
It's more fun and it's more metal,
Definitely
but it's less believable.
It certainly has a better climax. Yeah. I agree with all of that. I love Hellraiser, and immediately after watching another podcast, I went and read. Not only
the Hellbound
Heart, but then also Scarlet Gospels afterwards.
You went farther than I did. I read the Hellbound Heart after we did that episode too.
I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the shit out of that movie. It's definitely a new favorite of mine.
We got to get you watching Hellraiser 2. Hellraiser 2 is great.
Let's do it.
Fun.
And I still prefer the film. I definitely would pick Hellraiser over Jacob's Ladder. But
it's a better movie, yeah.
And I do think that the depictions of if I had to choose, which I shouldn't, but if I had to, I would pick the demons in Jacob's Ladder.
It's more believable. I think we're ready to transition into ratings.
Yeah. I did find a little bit more about the scenes that they cut.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Give us that. I'm
says,
curious.
After initial test audience reported that the film was overwhelming, director Adrian Lyne cut out 20 minutes of material, almost all of which came from the last third of the film. 4 major sequences were removed after Jacob meets Michael.
Yeah.
Wow, you called it front to back.
A scene where Michael gives him an antidote for the ladder. a scene where Jacob thinks he's cured, but it turns out not to be.
Oh, and the grasp comes back.
A scene where he goes to Michael's apartment and finds Michael decapitated.
Damn!
And a scene just prior to his final meeting with Gabe where he meets Jezzy, who shows her true form, which, like I was saying... huge demon monster.
That all sounds great. The movie would have been 2.5 hours long.
At least it would have been interesting second half.
Honestly, with this movie, overwhelming is what I wanted.
Yeah,
like that's what the
good death is.
The dread that it's building up to that, like that climax. It is so like such creeping horror that comes up to that, like an overwhelming.
Don't cut it.
Yeah,
like give me something to look at, like in that last sequence. I'm a baboon man. I just want a little entertainment. Like, just give me something. Just give me my caveman tendencies and spook me a little bit.
Do you think they'll ever release that cut? Because it almost certainly still exists.
Oh yeah, does that footage exist? Because if so,
I'm sure there's some deleted scenes out there. I don't know if there's a final cut.
They would have no reason to destroy that footage. The original cut of the film with all of that stuff almost certainly still exists somewhere. And if we ever get a cut of that, like that could fix all of my problems with this movie.
Seriously.
I'll go into ratings because I have a thought on that. Like, depending on how those scenes were, if they were in the movie, like I think this could be a 5 out of 5 film for me. Like it feels like it in the first 2 acts. It's in that third act where it just sort of sputters out into anticlimax at the very end, at the end, because it feels like it's missing something, and it sounds like what it's missing exists. And
what a bummer.
Right, and that is a bummer. And because of that, I cannot give this film a 5 out of 5 because it lets me down. But based on the strength of most of the film, it's still a strong 4 out of 5 for me, I think. Jacob's Ladder is still a great film.
Yeah, and I would mirror a lot of that. I think aesthetically it's super strong. In terms of atmosphere and tone, it really does a good job. I do still have some minor problems with how disparate it can be with all the storylines at times, and as well as how quickly it wraps itself up and how directly it gives you that ladder exposition. But overall, I think it's a really solid movie. It's a movie that's grown on me upon multiple watches. I would give it a 4 out of 5 too.
I'm not going to waste y'all's time just saying the same things. Ditto all of that, 4 out of 5.
Okay. Unanimous 4 out of 5 pods for Jacob's Ladder. We didn't talk about Jason Alexander's character. He's fun. He's not an important character, but George Costanza, attorney at law.
Yeah.
That's a great way to sort of build into the conspiracy, is to try to bring a class action lawsuit against the government, and then have the lawyer be sort of like, there's nothing, you've led me on a wild goose chase, like stay away from me, and then to have him picked up by the G-men right outside the courthouse. Good stuff. My point is, Jason Alexander in more things. This was like at the very beginning of Seinfeld. He was probably filming this around the same time as the first season of Seinfeld. Which
also was really funny because the scientist was named Newman.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Newman. There's a weird amount of like notable actors in this movie and like really big parts. Like Jason Alexander, Louis Black is the doctor in the hospital, I think.
I know Danny Aiello.
Danny Aiello is the chiropractor.
Ving Rhames.
Kyle Gass of Tenacious D is in this movie.
What?
I couldn't spot him. I was looking for him the whole movie, and I think he was one of the platoon mates. Maybe was he the other one who called him, who was seeing the demon? No, I don't think so.
It didn't look like him.
No. But he is credited in this movie.
Oh, that's weird. I'm getting flashes of his face, but I can't place it.
I couldn't figure out.
God, I wish I'd known. I would have been looking too.
His character's name is Tony, but like it's New York, and like Tony is the most generic, like Guido name.
I will say also Tim Robbins' glasses in this movie that he was wearing kind of made him look like Dwight Schrute the whole time.
A little bit. Man, I really like Tim Robbins. I haven't seen. We were talking about this before the movie, but I haven't seen him in anything in forever. I guess he's doing a lot of TV stuff.
A lot
now,
of TV, a lot of
like
stage stuff.
Stage
from
stuff.
what I've heard.
Bring back Tim Robbins.
Yeah.
Hashtag bring back Tim Robbins.
Hashtag bring back Tim Robbins. One last thing before we close out the show. We did watch a trailer after this for a Jacob's Ladder remake that I had no idea happened.
I got 2 words for you. Jacob's batter.
Holy shit! Yeah,
Yeah.
Says it all. I have nothing else to say.
You were saying that it just came out too, right?
Hadn't even heard of it.
I think it
Wish I
came
had.
out on VOD
On
like
VOD.
Thursday.
That's
And it's
crazy.
coming to
Looks
theaters.
bad.
Quote unquote. I don't think it's gonna get a wide release
I
next
hope
month.
not. Yeah, holy shit. It's I guess it's kind of prescient that I picked this film for this week, right? When the Jacob's Ladder remake that I didn't know was happening comes out. It looks really fucking bad.
It looks like a retelling
dog
of it
shit.
that's more straightforward, and that sounds like a nightmare. I won't watch it.
What I found confusing about it is that it has a lot of exact references to the
Bathtub
original
of
movie
Ice,
in the trailer.
Shaking heads.
The shaking head
Heads,
demons,
the subway,
but it's about
but cleaner.
But Jacob is just like a guy, and his brother comes back from the war, and he's quote unquote bringing these demons with him after they thought his brother was dead, which leads me to believe that there's gonna be some convoluted nonsense about his brother being like a ghost that like brings hell with him, and that it's probably not going to be allegorical, and that it's just going to be literal. It looks terrible.
I did see that this movie was written by the Midnight Meat Train dude.
Oh, okay.
Which explains quite a bit.
That makes sense.
Produced by the people who brought you Straight Outta Compton. So.
No, proudly stated in the trailer. We all laughed at that.
Have y'all seen the Midnight Meat Train?
I haven't, no.
I watched it a couple of years ago. It's okay. It's got a lot of really stupid things, but it has some fun ideas.
Would you call it well written, though?
The movie, no. However, it is based on a Clive Barker short story on the subject of Clive Barker and Hellraiser. No. I would not describe it as well written, but it wasn't the worst. But holy shit, this Jacob's Ladder remake looks really fucking bad. I might watch it out of morbid curiosity, but I'm certainly not going to go out of my way to see it.
Well, I'll tell you what,
interest.
if I win predictions...
Don't you dare. You know what? I will take that. Oh, you know what? I'm not even
Don't
gonna
say it.
I'm not even
You
going to say
already
it.
know.
I'm not even going to say it.
Why
because I'm
not
giving you
both?
ideas. Don't you dare. Don't you fucking dare.
Better hope that
I don't win.
That one of us wins the end of wins the prediction game.
I will be taking a flight to where I'm not telling you.
Ben will destroy
you will
us.
never find me again.
I hope
I will vanish off
I
the
hope
face
you're
of the
excited for 47 meters down uncaged as well.
Is it going to be that, The Curse of La Llorona, and
Don't.
Jacob's Ladder?
I wasn't gonna say it. I didn't want to.
I'm not going to spoil my picks.
It's going to be those. So hopefully Ben doesn't win.
Please, no.
I'm barely
I
in the
won't.
lead at the moment. Did 47 meters down, do we have numbers for that yet?
That comes out in a couple weeks. I think
Okay.
it comes out on the 16th of August.
Whatever, I'm not concerned about it then. I just know that we predicted it. Well, I think that should be the last of everything.
Yeah, sponsor?
Oh yeah, do you have a sponsor for us, Cleve?
Of course, yeah, there's always
From the sponsor shelf?
Yeah, let me pull this one off. This little bottle next to
hail
it.
sponsor shelf.
Hail. All right, so the bottle, all right, and there's a note attached to it. It says, are you ever, did your head ever shaken too much? Have a friend whose head is just wriggling around, little too much, a little unsettling. It's got some weird demon poop. Has some weird, on the subway. You had is your loved one suffering from getting banged by demons at parties? Don't worry about it anymore. Talk to your doctor about clotidolin. Get your
About what?
clotidolin.
Clotidolin.
Clotidolin. And let your demon rattling head be gone.
Thanks, Clotilde.
Don't think. It says that on the note.
Don't think. Okay, shit. I fucked up then. Hopefully they'll still give us our money. Well, I think that will bring us to the end of this week's episode. Next week, we're moving on to Cleveland's Next Choice. And we're going to be talking about a film that you actually haven't seen, Cleveland.
I know.
But a film that Ben and I have seen and that I love very much.
One of my favorites.
One of my favorites of all time.
Top 10.
Y'all keep going.
Probably.
Shit, you got to see Night of the Hunter. It's really good. It's great. I love it. But I won't say anything about it. So I'm like, all right, my intrigue is piqued.
The Night of the Hunter. Classic by Charles Laughton from 1954, starring the incomparable Robert Mitchum.
Well, we'll find out if I've got a lot to say about it.
The only film directed by Charles Laughton.
Yeah, and we'll get into that because there's a good story behind that. I have been wanting to do an episode on The Night of the Hunter for a very long time, and Cleveland, considering your penchant for classic films and black and white films, I'm surprised you haven't seen this one, and all I will say is, hoo boy, you are in for a treat, because there's no way you're not gonna love it. So tune back in next week for our review of Night of the Hunter. But until then, while you wait for our next episode, why don't you head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, whatever dispensary that may be, and leave us a 5-star rating and a nice review. That would really help us move our way up in the numbers, and we'd appreciate it greatly. And if you're interested in some random GIFs of little girls riding alligators, then follow us on Twitter at PodPeoplePod.
That's a thing.
I posted one of those from the Twitter account this last week. So at PodPeoplePod on Twitter. Also follow us on letterboxd.com/podpeoplepod for a complete list of all the films we've talked about on the show with our average ratings and the links to our reviews, as well as a list of our hallowed golden pods, the handful of films that we have unanimously rated a perfect 5 out of 5. You can find all of that on letterboxd.com/podpeoplepod. You can follow me on Twitter at Mr. Van Awesome.
I'm on Twitter at Mr. Sheets.
I'm on Twitter tweeting for Light Arc Studio. And you can also check out all my sweet doodles on ArtStation. And you can also see them moving around and trying to eat your face in our collective game, It Stares Back. It's pretty rad. It's got some spookies in it. If you haven't played it, go check it out. It's on Steam. Just Google it. It'll show up. It Stares Back.
Yeah, it's a cool $6 right now, but will not be forever as we add more content. But all future content will be free if you already own the game, so get it while it's hot for a cool $6 American dollars. Steam, It Stares Back, do the ding-dang thing. And that should be everything.
Download the prologue on edenbynostalgia.bandcamp.com.
The official soundtrack.
Yes.
Hell yeah, it's great. And it's also streaming, but if you purchase it on Bandcamp from Ben's Bandcamp page, it comes
bonus.
It comes with 4 bonus tracks?
4 bonus songs.
And they're delicious, I can vouch.
They're very tasty. So do that. Also, we have a great visual album of it made by Cleveland and Ben, available on YouTube, our YouTube channel, Light Arc Studio. So I think that's all the plugs. Thank you, as always, for listening. Tune back next week for Night of the Hunter. We are the Pod People, ascending the ladder into the blinding light.
Up we go.